Welcome back to the City Current Radio Show. I'm your host, Jeremy Park. We're honored to be joined by our next guest, our friend Mollie Walker. She's a co-founder with Tennessee Fertility Advocates. How are you doing, Mollie?
Hey, I'm so good, Jeremy. Thank you so much for having me on the show today.
Absolutely. So the work you're doing has a personal foundation for you and your family. So let's start there. So share a little bit of your personal story.
Absolutely. So my husband and I, as soon as we got married, we wanted to wait just a little while before trying to have kids. But you always get asked that question, well, when are you having children? And you just got married, so we want to enjoy it. But we thought it would be pretty easy for us. We're both healthy, we're young, we're in shape. We decided to try to have a baby, and it was a journey. So our journey has really consisted over about 7 years. We were able to conceive with my daughter. Through that, we found out I had an issue with ovulating and was able to get on some medicine, and it helped with that issue. But after that, when we were ready to have our second, we ended up having 2 miscarriages. It was extremely difficult. It was a very hard time. We were referred to Fertility Associates of Memphis, where I saw Dr. Amelia Bailey, who was incredible. And she basically helped discover I had a rare blood clotting issue. And so once we were able to treat that along with the other issues I was facing, we were able to conceive our second child, Noah, who is now 2. And throughout that span, I had no insurance coverage. It was extremely burdensome. We spent thousands of dollars getting to that point. And our journey, I know it is small compared to many. However, it has led me to want to become an advocate for those who are really struggling with infertility and be a voice for them.
What's interesting is when you start putting your story out there, at first you think you're alone, then you start sharing your story and you realize so many others are going through a similar experience, and they're dealing with, especially when you talk about a miscarriage, the grief and how do you process that. And then like you mentioned, the costs, the insurance, there's a lot that goes into this. And so when you talk about this being a personal passion, now obviously you're finding that there's a lot of people that are coming to your side and rallying for change. So talk about now this being a grassroots organization and how you're building this momentum. And so give us a little bit of just where you are with this.
Oh, I'd love to. So 1 in 6 individuals are going to have infertility. And what everyone should know is it's not just a female factor. So there's male infertility as well. It's female. And then there's unexplained infertility where really everything looks great and they're not sure why you can't conceive. So it is so common, but when I went through it, it was like I didn't know anyone who was going through it because it was so hush-hush. And one of the reasons for advocating is I want to be a voice. I want to be a voice for change, and I want to advocate along with people saying it's okay to share your story. Like, we don't have to be embarrassed. Our disease is no different from cancer, diabetes, anything of that sort. It is a disease defined by ASRM. So therefore, it is about advocating for change. Lauren McKnight Brown is a really good friend of mine. We grew up together, been friends since we were 5, but she also suffered through infertility. And through our journey, our paths intertwined again. And we just really realized after doing a federal advocacy day with a national nonprofit named Resolve, we said, we can do this on a state level. There's 18 states that offer coverage of some sort for infertility patients and fertility preservation, but Tennessee is not one of those. So why not do some research, reach out to our network of people, and make a difference? And so we've started Tennessee Fertility Advocate Group. It is basically a grassroots coalition started here in Memphis, Tennessee, and we are spreading like wildfire through the state of Tennessee. We have advocates popping up from Nashville, Chattanooga, Knoxville, all over across the state, now speaking up, joining in on the movement on our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, website, saying, hey, I'm suffering. I have spent $20,000, $100,000, $200,000 for a disease that I have or my spouse has, trying to build a family. So we are a pro-family group advocating for change, and that is really what matters to us.
When you look at, like you mentioned, other states and what they're doing well and taking those best practices and benchmarks and bringing them to Tennessee, share a few examples of some of the things you think, here are some states that are doing it well that we could learn from.
Absolutely. So a really great one is New Hampshire. New Hampshire just signed into law by a Republican governor last year, infertility coverage. And so basically New Hampshire, the lady that helped Davina, she is with Fertility Within Reach. She helped co-write that legislation. She has been a lobbyist. She works with other states to work on creating change and creating stricter legislation. But New Hampshire offers unlimited coverage for those struggling with infertility. And I think that is just extremely important. Colorado just passed legislation this year with a sponsor, Representative Carrie Tipper, who I was been able to connect with and hear how they were able to make it so quick and also so effective for Coloradans. So those are just two really just states that have happened recently. There are obviously states who have had, Arkansas is one, Texas has some coverage, but some of these states offer a very small amount of coverage that might not even cover one IVF cycle. And so there are different things when looking at the states. For examples, Tennessee is different. The political climate in Tennessee is different. We are conservative, and we want to make the legislation as best we can for the state of Tennessee, not comparing it to New Hampshire or Colorado or any of the other states. We want to set the precedent and say this is great legislation that could really make a difference in building families. You know, Tennessee's growth rate is declining. And so this would be a great reason to say, hey, if we do this and then we can help with this disease, we could maybe start seeing that growth rate come up. Because you think a couple that just got married, making $35,000 each, and then all they have is IVF, that is their only choice, which the average cost is $20,000 for their disease. You know, how are they going to be able to afford it? And you have to pay in full. So it is not just something that it can just happen over time. Like if you want to build a family and you have a disease that prevents you from doing that, IVF might be the only option. And so asking a newly married couple, barely making it, to give out $20,000 is just, it's crazy. And then also just think about those that, you know, want to build their family and they maybe work at an employer that doesn't offer coverage, which many don't. But we have companies like International Paper and True Green here locally that do offer some type of IVF coverage or infertility coverage. You know, Jeremy, I could be a barista at Starbucks and I would get $20,000 towards it part-time.
Wow.
And I mean, there are companies doing this across the country. You know why? Because they believe in the importance of building families and what is important to the workforce of the future. Building families. And if you're hiring 20 and 30-year-olds, this should be a benefit that should be a no-brainer because they invest in the next generation.
Yeah, and what you're talking about is not just the advocacy across the state, but to your point, it's raising awareness for other companies saying, hey, wait a second, it's not just the political side of this, it's how do we get more companies to be a part of this as well and open up the floodgates.
Hey, that is exactly it. So we have a vision on a state level for sure, but then also your self-insured companies, your large corporations, your FedExes, First Horizon, your big headquartered companies in the state of Tennessee, this is something that we are really advocating for on both sides through key connections, through doing things like this, spreading the word and finding advocates that are willing to go to their employer, and I will provide any type of information necessary to help you have that conversation. I will help you have that conversation. However that looks like. Progeny is another good resource. There are companies that really want to help see employers add coverage. Willis Towers Watson, another great one. I could go on and on. There are resources out there, and it just takes one person speaking up, asking, why is this not offered? This is so important to me, and if this was offered, I would be such a better employee. I would be loyal to this organization because they gave me 2 beautiful children. And just so you see, these are the 2 as well that I'm advocating for. And those are my sweet 5-year-old and my 2-year-old. But Jeremy, by the time they get older, this will already be so far advanced. And I am saying it here today. It will happen. And it's just a matter of who's ready to get on board with that and get the ball rolling because it's important to build families.
Yeah, I agree. And I think for companies, you're making it easy by one, just finding someone who can be the ambassador, so to speak, the champion, but really then giving them the tools and saying, here are what other companies are doing. So here are those best practices. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Just
Right.
make yourself a lot more competitive and
Sure.
make your employees happy and more inspired and family oriented. Everything that they're wanting, you're able to then help them achieve. And I think those sort of things, everyone comes out the hero. So there's so much positivity to power the good there, which is awesome.
Absolutely.
Talk about some of your goals. When you look at, especially over the next 12 months, 24 months and beyond, what are some of your major objectives?
Okay, so that's a great question. So Lauren and I have kind of thought through a lot of these things. Some of our major objectives right now, we are almost done with the final draft of our legislation. So we've been working for months on that with special attorneys, surrogacy attorneys, general counsel at a very large corporation is assisting as well, Fertility Within Reach, multiple individuals, a doctor at St. Jude, our fertility doctors, looking at this, like I said, to make sure that this is the best legislation that we have. And then also, you know, my key thing right now is reaching out to sponsors and figuring out, okay, who in the Senate, who in the House is willing to say, we believe in building families? Who is going to be the champion for this legislation? And so we are in discussion with a few right now and really excited about the momentum that is happening. Over the next 12 months, we would love to have this bill submitted when they go back to session next year and to have it really presented in the House and in the Senate. Obviously, we would love to see it pass. We want to get advocates across the state willing to write their legislators. You know, we can make that as easy as possible, but it takes our constituents speaking up to our elected officials saying, hey, we want you to sponsor this bill. Here is my story. This is why it matters. And honestly, Jeremy, my biggest thing is we want families just like they have families, you know, and it's no different. But yet, because of financial burdens due to a disease that they didn't ask for, it has prevented them to do so. So we're no different from the others. It is just seriously about building families. And if you look at it as looking at, say, maybe you have children or someone has grandchildren, you would do anything for them to experience what it's like to have the gift of life, right? There is nothing you wouldn't do. You would refinance your house, Jeremy. You would sell your car and all your belongings if it meant for your children to be able to have their own children. You would do it. And so that is what we're trying to convey. It shouldn't be that hard. We should have had this so figured out. People don't have to come to banks for loans. They don't have to pay up to 25% in interest, which is what some credit cards charge to pay for IVF in full. That is absolutely insane. So over the next year, we would love to see this legislation pass. Obviously, there will be obstacles that come our way, and we're willing to go at those and try to find a common ground, honestly, with insurance companies and show with research how this has saved money by doing IVF because it is more focused on a single embryo transfer, which in turn helps not have your twins and your triplets and preemie stays in the hospital and the $1 million bill that follows all of those things. So there is just so much in the works, but finding those champion sponsors and just really praying for just some wisdom along the way are just some things that we are really working on right now and just finalizing the perfect legislation for that.
Well, you kind of answered the next question, which is how can we help? But I want you to dive in deeper because obviously, like you said, you're looking for champions. You're looking for people to rally and join the cause. And so that's one piece of this, but talk about how we can help.
Absolutely, glad to. So there's a few different ways. Now, there's some couples I've come across who are like, you know what, we'll help write our letter, but we don't want to publicly go really public with our story. And those are, I respect that because I was in a season of that. I get it. However, now I've realized the power of your story. And if you don't share it, like at least for me, God's given it to me for a reason. And I think it's for this right here. And same for Lauren. And so having advocates who are willing to join in on our website, which is www.tnfertilityadvocates.com. Find us at Tennessee Fertility Advocates on Facebook, TN Fertility Advocates on Instagram, and then TN Fertility ADV on Twitter. Find us there. Go to our website. There's a take action page. We have a survey you can fill out and just let us know, hey, I would be willing to share my story publicly with the news or with in front of legislators, or I want to do it anonymously. We can take that too. Or you know what, even Jeremy, if somebody was to say, hey, you know what, I actually know this representative personally. They know I've been affected by infertility. Why don't I just call him and share why it's important? We are looking for connections across the board. We're looking for those who are willing to speak to their employer. And again, we'll provide plenty of assistance along the way. We are just looking for those who are tired of paying ridiculous amounts of money for a disease they didn't ask for, and they want to help build families, whether these advocates have been personally affected or not. Even family members or friends. I have some friends in our group who say, you know what, Mollie, I wasn't affected, but because you were, I knew your journey, I will gladly write a letter, or I'll gladly make a phone call on your behalf. So we are looking for anyone and everyone willing to help.
Well, I definitely think it's a cause worth fighting for, and so I encourage people to get involved. And obviously, like you said, check you out on your website, on social media, and raise your hand to be a part of the solution. So, Mollie, thank you for all you do, you and your team, and thank you for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it, and hopefully you'll have me back when we have some more information to pass along.
Absolutely.